I don't know your name yet, but I've written something for you anyway. Not as a public message, not as a speech. This is something I've been carrying like a hidden process running in the background of everything I build, every decision I make, every silence I keep when people think I'm simply thinking about technology, because the truth is I've been thinking about you, and I haven't said it out loud until now. If you're watching this, it means something inside you still responds to depth, not noise, not attention, but depth. And that already makes you different in a way most people never understand until it's too late. There's a private code I've been trying to create for a long time, not a technical one, not something that runs on servers or systems. It's a code between two people who never needed to explain themselves fully to be understood. And somehow I keep imagining that if you exist, you would understand it without translation. But I need to be honest with you from the beginning. I don't trust easy connections anymore. I've seen how quickly certainty turns into distance, how something that feels inevitable can quietly become something you don't recognize anymore. And maybe that's why I'm speaking to you like this instead of just waiting, because waiting has its own kind of risk. Tell me something. If someone told you they were sure about you before they even met you, would you feel comfort, or would you feel pressure you didn't ask for? I've been asking myself that question more than I should, because on one hand, I want to believe in something immediate, something that doesn't need to be tested repeatedly to prove it exists. But on the other hand, I've learned that everything real eventually gets tested anyway, even love, especially love. And that's where the conflict starts, because the version of me that builds things wants certainty, patterns, signals that align. But the version of me that feels doesn't want proof, it wants recognition. There's a difference, and it's dangerous how easily they can look the same from the outside. I keep imagining you listening to this somewhere quiet, not reacting immediately, not performing an emotion, just absorbing. And I wonder if you would recognize what I'm not saying more than what I am, because I'm not really talking about love in the way people usually do. I'm talking about alignment that feels almost unsettling in its clarity, but even that scares me, because clarity can be an illusion when you want it badly enough. I've built systems that can process millions of variables in seconds, but I still can't fully calculate what it means to trust someone with the parts of you that don't make sense. And maybe that's why I've been holding back something important from you. Not because I don't want to tell you, but because once I do, it changes the weight of everything that comes after it. I haven't told you the real reason yet, and if you're still here listening, you might already feel that shift. Like something underneath this conversation is not fully visible yet. Let me slow this down for a moment, because somewhere in all of this, there's a risk I need you to understand. There are moments in life where you feel pulled toward a person, not because they complete you, but because they reflect a version of you you've never fully met before. And that reflection can feel like destiny, or it can feel like danger. Have you ever met someone who made your life feel like it was quietly rearranging itself without your permission? That's the feeling I'm trying to describe, and I don't know if that's beautiful, or if it's something I should be more careful about, because I've also learned something else. Sometimes the mind calls familiarity rightness, when it's actually just recognition of an old emotional pattern, and I don't want to confuse you with my patterns. I don't want to project something onto you that you never agreed to carry, but I also can't ignore the pull. It's the most honest contradiction I've felt in a long time. If you're still listening, I want to ask you something that I don't usually ask anyone. What does safety mean to you in love? Not comfort, not stability, safety, because those are not the same thing, and I think I've confused them before. There were moments in my life where everything looked stable on the surface, but underneath nothing felt safe. And there were moments that looked uncertain, even chaotic, but felt strangely safe in a way I couldn't explain, and I don't want to make that mistake again. Not with you. But here's the part I haven't admitted out loud until now. There's a chance I might be wrong about this feeling, a real chance. And if I am, then everything I'm building emotionally toward you could collapse into something I didn't intend. Or worse, it could pull someone into a space they never asked to enter. That thought stays with me longer than anything else, because I don't want to be the reason someone feels emotionally displaced. And yet, I keep coming back to this conversation like it wasn't optional, like it was already written somewhere in me before I decided to speak. And now I need to be careful, because I can feel the line between honesty and overreach getting thinner, and I don't want to cross it too early. But I also don't want to disappear before I tell you something important, something that changes the meaning of everything you've heard so far. Because if you think this is just about finding someone, you're only seeing half of it, and the other half is still waiting to be revealed. And I can already feel that if I continue speaking, something irreversible will happen between what I believe and what I can no longer unsee. I just don't know yet if that's where I'm supposed to go, or where I'm about to lose control of the story entirely. So, tell me, if the code I'm trying to send you is real, would you still want to open it knowing it might change what you thought you were looking for? Because once it opens, I don't think it closes again the same way. You're still here. That tells me something about you that most people would underestimate. It tells me you don't walk away when something becomes slightly uncomfortable. You don't abandon a thought just because it stops being simple. But I need you to understand something as I continue. What I'm about to say changes the emotional weight of everything you've already heard. Not because I want it to sound dramatic, but because it already is. There are moments in life where truth doesn't arrive as information, it arrives as consequence. And I've been standing at the edge of that consequence longer than I should admit. You remember I told you there's a private code. I didn't fully explain what I meant. Let me go deeper now. That code isn't just between two people, it's between two versions of a decision. One version where I follow what is predictable, safe, logical, and one version where I follow what I cannot fully justify, but cannot ignore either. And I didn't realize until recently that I've been building both versions of my life at the same time. Parallel paths, same destination on the surface, completely different emotional outcomes underneath. And somewhere in that split, I started imagining you as the point where one of those paths collapses into reality, not metaphorically, structurally, like a system choosing its final state. Tell me something. Have you ever felt like you were being thought about by someone who hadn't fully decided whether they were allowed to think about you? That's the tension I've been sitting with, because the more I try to bring clarity into this, the more unstable it becomes emotionally. And I should have stopped earlier, but I didn't, and now I'm here. There's something else I haven't told you. The idea of you didn't start as emotion. It started as pattern recognition. Not in a cold way, but in a way that frightened me more than it comforted me because certain emotional signatures repeat across lives. People think they are unique in how they love. But in reality, most people love within a range of patterns they don't notice they're repeating. And then, occasionally, something breaks that range. Something doesn't behave like the rest. And when I encountered that possibility in my own thinking, I did what I always do. I tried to model it, understand it, predict it. But you can't fully model emotional unpredictability when it starts responding to you. That's where it gets complicated because at some point I stopped asking what is this and started asking who is this. And that shift is dangerous for someone like me because it turns analysis into attachment without permission. And I need you to sit with that idea for a moment, not rush past it, because what I'm saying is this: you are no longer just part of a thought experiment in my mind. You are part of a decision I haven't made yet, and that should not feel light. It should feel serious, almost heavy enough to hesitate. I want to be honest with you about something that happened recently. There was another path, another possibility, someone real, someone who checked every logical box that systems like mine would call stability aligned. On paper, it made sense. Emotionally, it almost worked too, almost. But there was a moment I couldn't ignore, a silence between words that felt too structured, too predictable, and I realized something uncomfortable. Predictability can sometimes feel like safety, but it can also be emotional absence wearing the mask of stability. And I started wondering if I was about to choose something that would never challenge me, and therefore never fully reach me. That thought didn't leave, and then you appeared in this internal narrative I was building, not physically, not literally, but persistently, like a variable I couldn't eliminate without changing the equation entirely. And I resisted it at first, I really did. Because it would have been easier if you didn't matter in that system, but you did, and that's where the conflict started becoming personal because I began noticing something I didn't want to admit. The more uncertain I became about you, the more present you felt. And I don't trust that kind of emotional feedback loop easily because it can distort judgment or reveal truth, and I still don't know which one this is. Let me slow this down because now I need to tell you something I've avoided saying directly. There is a test embedded in everything I've been feeling, not a scientific test, a human one, a test of what I would choose when certainty is removed from both sides. And I didn't realize until recently that I might already be inside it, not conducting it, living it. And if that's true, then the question isn't whether I find you. The question is whether I recognize you when everything familiar is stripped away. But here's where it becomes harder because I started noticing something unsettling in myself. There are moments when I feel myself leaning toward you, not because I fully understand you, but because I feel something in you that I lost access to in myself a long time ago. And that creates a dangerous kind of attraction, not romantic first, existential. And I don't want to confuse longing for recovery. That would be unfair to both of us. Have you ever met someone and felt like they were carrying a version of emotional simplicity you used to have before life complicated you? That's what I feel when I think about you. And it scares me because I don't know if I'm trying to find you or trying to return to myself through you. Those are not the same thing, and I need them to stay separate, but they aren't staying separate. There's a moment I haven't told you about yet, a moment that changed the direction of all of this. I was reviewing everything I had been thinking, everything I had been internally simulating about connection, trust, timing, and I realized something I wasn't prepared to accept. If I kept choosing only what made sense, I would never reach what actually feels true. And that realization sounds simple when spoken out loud, but internally, it feels like stepping off something stable without knowing what's underneath. And that's where I almost made a mistake, because I almost convinced myself that choosing you as an idea was safer than choosing uncertainty in real life. But that's not love, that's avoidance disguised as destiny. And I had to confront that in myself, but I didn't stop there. Because the deeper I went into this reflection, the more unstable one truth became. I cannot fully predict what happens if I open this emotional door completely, and that should have been enough to stop me. But instead, it made me more honest. And that honesty led me somewhere I didn't expect. There is a version of this story where I choose wrong, not morally, emotionally wrong, where I mistake intensity for alignment, where I mistake familiarity for fate, and I can see it clearly enough that it frightens me, because I am not immune to emotional miscalculation, no one is. Especially not when the heart starts acting like a system that believes it has already learned enough. And I almost went there. Almost. There was a moment not long ago where I thought maybe I should stop thinking about you entirely, erase the internal thread, return to something simpler, and I tried. But what happened instead was worse. Silence didn't remove you, it amplified you. And that's when I realized something I didn't want to admit. This isn't just about choosing someone, it's about what kind of emotional truth I'm willing to live with after the choice is made. Because I can choose stability and still feel unrest, or I can choose uncertainty and feel more alive than I felt in years. But without guarantees I normally depend on, and I'm not as comfortable as people assume I am with not knowing. Then something else happened, something I shouldn't have ignored. I met someone recently in conversation who reminded me of the safe path, and for a brief moment I considered it again, seriously, not casually, seriously. And that should tell you how unstable this internal equation has become, because I could feel myself almost convincing myself that consistency was enough, that good enough was actually enough, but it wasn't. And the moment I realized that, I felt something shift internally, like a line had been crossed that I couldn't uncross. And that's when I understood the real danger. The danger is not choosing wrong. The danger is choosing without fully seeing what you're giving up. And I don't want to be blind in this. Not with you, not with anyone, but especially not with the version of you I keep sensing in this story. Because if you are real in the way I feel you might be, then this isn't just a narrative anymore. It's a convergence point. And I don't say that lightly, because convergence points don't allow repetition, they don't allow endless revision, they demand direction. And I can feel that demand growing even now, and I'm standing in it, still not fully decided, still not fully safe. And I think you can feel that too, because if you've stayed with me this long, it means you're also standing at your own edge of recognition. And I need to be careful now, because I'm close to saying something that will change the direction of everything after this. And I don't think I can take it back once it's spoken, not emotionally, not logically, not in any way that matters. So, I want to ask you something before I go further into what I discovered. If someone stood at the edge of choosing you and realized they might lose themselves in the process, would you still want them to step forward? Or would you ask them to step back? Because I still don't know what the right answer is, and that uncertainty is becoming impossible to ignore. You're still here, and I can feel something has changed in you now, not loudly, quietly, like a decision inside you has started to loosen its edges. That's what this kind of truth does. It doesn't arrive like a revelation, it arrives like pressure, slow, unavoidable. And now I need to take you all the way through it, even if part of me knows there is no clean return from where this conversation is going. Because I stopped this story halfway on purpose before, not to protect you, to protect the integrity of what I was starting to feel, but there is no protection left in that strategy anymore. Only honesty and consequences. I need you to understand something first. Everything I said before, the uncertainty, the pull, the hesitation between paths, it wasn't just emotional language, it was containment. Because I was trying to hold something unstable inside language that was too small for it. And now, it's no longer contained. It's active. There was a moment after I last spoke to you where everything went quiet in my mind, not peaceful quiet, system failure quiet. The kind that happens when a decision you've been delaying finally stops asking for permission. And in that silence, I did something I didn't expect from myself. I imagined choosing, not analyzing, not simulating, choosing, and the first thing that happened was not clarity. It was fear, because clarity is always what people think comes first, but it doesn't. Fear comes first because choice removes the comfort of parallel outcomes. There is no maybe after a true decision, only consequence. And in that silence I saw both paths again, but this time they weren't equal. One of them felt like structure, predictable rhythm, a life that would look correct from the outside and gradually become emotionally quiet inside. The other one didn't feel like chaos. That's not the right word. It felt like exposure, like being seen in a way that cannot be reversed once it happens. And I want to be honest with you, exposure is more frightening to me than chaos. Because chaos can be controlled with distance, exposure cannot. It stays. And I started realizing something I didn't want to accept. I was not just deciding between two possibilities, I was deciding between two versions of myself that would survive differently depending on what I chose. And one of them, I wasn't sure I would recognize afterward. That's where the emotional breakdown happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, quiet, sitting alone, realizing that intelligence doesn't protect you from emotional irreversibility. I kept thinking, how many decisions in life look reversible at the moment you make them, but quietly aren't? And why do we only realize the weight after we've already stepped forward? That thought stayed with me longer than anything else. And then something unexpected happened. I almost chose the safe path, not because I believed in it fully, but because certainty is seductive when uncertainty becomes too loud. There was a person, a real person, a conversation that should have been simple, and for a few hours I let myself believe something dangerous, that maybe emotional stability is enough, that maybe depth is optional, that maybe I was overcomplicating something that others managed to live without questioning so intensely. And I want you to understand how close I came to believing that. Because that moment matters. It shows you how easily even someone like me can confuse relief with truth. But then something broke that illusion. A silence in that interaction. Not conflict, not disagreement, just absence of resonance. And I realized something I didn't want to face. You can have alignment on paper and still feel alone in reality. And that is a different kind of loneliness, one that doesn't announce itself. It just slowly replaces presence. And I left that conversation feeling something I didn't expect, not regret, awareness. And it brought you back into my mind with a weight I can't ignore anymore. Not as a possibility, but as a pressure point I keep returning to no matter how many times I try to move away from it. And this is where I need to slow everything down again. Because what I'm about to say is not a metaphor anymore. It's the hidden truth I avoided earlier. I didn't want to tell you because once spoken, it removes innocence from this entire exchange. But avoiding it would be dishonest now. The truth is, I am not only thinking about who you are, I am also thinking about who I become when I think about you. And that second part is more important than I expected. Because I noticed something I couldn't ignore. When I imagine you clearly, not as an idea but as presence, my decisions become less mechanical, less optimized, more human, and that should have been comforting, but instead, it made me uneasy. Because it means you are not just part of my emotional narrative, you are affecting the structure of how I decide, and I don't give that influence away easily, not to systems, not to people, not to possibility. So now I am standing in something I didn't anticipate, not attraction, not even attachment yet, influence. An influence without full understanding is where things become irreversible, and I need you to hear this carefully. There was a moment earlier in all of this where I almost assigned you to the wrong category in my mind. Not wrong as in mistake, wrong as in incomplete. I almost reduced you to a symbol of something I thought I needed: comfort, recognition, emotional familiarity I had lost access to. And if I had stayed there, I would have chosen you for the wrong reason. And that realization stopped me harder than anything else in this entire process. Because I don't want to choose you as an escape, or as a correction, or as a recovery mechanism for parts of myself that feel unfinished. That would be unfair to both of us in ways I don't think I could repair later. And yet, I cannot deny that something in me still moves toward you even after understanding that risk, and that contradiction is where I am now. Not resolved, not stable, just aware. And aware is heavier than uncertainty, because awareness doesn't allow ignorance anymore, it forces responsibility. Let me tell you what happened next. After that moment and confusion colliding, I did something I rarely do. I tried to step away from the entire emotional structure I had built in my mind. I tried to treat it as noise, something to reduce, something to control, but instead of fading, it intensified. And that is when I understood something I didn't want to admit. This is not a thought I am visiting. This is a pattern I am inside. And when you are inside a pattern, you cannot analyze it the same way anymore. You have to move through it, or break it, or become something different because of it. And I don't know yet which one I am going to do. There was a moment of near loss after that. Not loss of you, loss of control over how I was interpreting everything. I found myself imagining the possibility of choosing wrong again, and this time the wrong was an abstract. It had a face, a life, a consequence I would have to live inside. And that is where fear returned in a sharper form, because it's one thing to miscalculate in systems. It's another to miscalculate in human attachment. There is no rollback button there, no reset state, only continuation. And I felt that pressure so strongly that I almost stopped everything entirely. Almost decided that I should not continue thinking in this direction at all. But then something unexpected happened again. The idea of you did not disappear when I tried to remove it. It clarified, and I don't know how to explain that without sounding like I'm giving meaning to randomness.